Well, Hawks were 0-5 after 5 rounds of this AFL season. Since then, they have turned the whole competition on its head. So we can't think of a better time to welcome their coach, Sam Mitchell. Sam, welcome to you. What did you do in the week after that 5th round game to create what has been the story of the season?
We're still 11th, so I don't think we're quite turning it on its head just yet. So we've still got some work to do, and we recognise that. But I think in round 5 we finally came to the understanding that the players need to be the ones to really take control of the group and not rely on outside influences, coaches and those things. And it's something we'd talked about a lot, but it was the first time it really had sunk in. And I think Dylan Moore's interview the next day where he said, bring your mouth guards, it was his words. And I think that has rippled through the group, and the standard of what we've done since then. We haven't got everything right, but the standard of what we've tried to do has been to a higher level.
Have you been blown away? Like in your quiet moments, are you thinking, wow, this has actually been nuts?
Yeah, I mean, I talk to the players quite regularly about sometimes as the coach, the best moment is just when you don't want to touch anything. Just let them do what they're doing. And there's been more and more of those moments as the season's progressed. And, I think the influence that you have as a coach, you hope it's small because you have guys like these two leading your groups. And you look at James Sicily and Dylan Moore and Luke Breust as our captain and 2 vice-captains. What they've been able to do on the field without influence of coaches, I think, has taken us to the next level. But we know that's not the level we need to get to. I still watch the very best teams and think they're a step in front of where we are right now.
Well, you're playing with a lot of joy, you boys, Mitch, and I don't know if the Hawthorn of old would be treating it the same way as or ever thought of the way that you may coach this side, but it's absolutely been enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, I think when we watch, there's been a lot of focus. Everything I see, it's about the celebrations, and they are celebrating a lot of good things. That one there is an example of why they celebrate. Dave McKay, our opposition analyst, he did this fantastic video saying when you play a team like Collingwood, it's like 2 rams going at each other and you have to meet it head on, and it takes 2 hours for these rams to just headbutt each other until one gives up, and no one will give up in a Hawthorn versus Collingwood game. And so when Connor McDonald does that celebration, he's actually shouting out to the players to go back to what we were focused on as a team. So I think you think it's individualistic, but they're actually celebrating it together. So I think that's why it's been embraced.
Mitch, none of us who watched you play with the ridiculous hard edge you played with can believe that a team that's underneath you is taking selfies after the game. And I mean, you have embraced this in a way that I don't think any of us who watched you and loved watching you play for so many years would have thought you would have.
I mean, I think you obviously move with the times, and you have to coach to the group that you have. If we were trying to get this group to behave in a serious manner, they'd play in a different way. Would that make them play better? I don't think so. I think we'll evolve, and at some point this will be thrown back at us to say, look at them carrying on. But what I have loved about this group is they were willing to do the goal celebrations early in the season. When we were zipping 5, we were doing goal celebrations, and there was people criticising, saying, look at this, they're 7 goals down and carrying on. But that's the joy that they want to play with. I think I learnt a bit this year, probably from Ange Postecoglou, and he did a lot of stuff overseas where he was talking about football's a hard sport, and when you get on a roll and when you have goals, you should celebrate them and your fans should celebrate them, and that means allowing the players to carry on a little bit.
Mitch, you're an incredibly talented and knowledgeable player, and as a coach, obviously, a lot of that is required. But what is the most important, or what is your greatest strength that is allowing you to flourish in the role as senior coach?
I think being surrounded by great people is the most important thing. I think a lot of what you have to do as a coach is around management of people. And so there's the on-field and the coaching and the tactical side of things. But, we talk fairly regularly that an average plan really well executed will beat a perfect plan poorly executed. And so we always talk about, can the players execute this and how can we coach it in the best way? So it's coaches, it's, whether it's physios or support staff for mental skills, all of these people go into making the mix right. And then I think the beauty of coaching is when it's going well, you actually take your hands away and just let it happen. And when we've had our best games, the coaches have done the least.
When you talk about execution, it was fascinating at the weekend the way you played against Collingwood, because the 2 previous losses that they'd had, teams had denied them the ball, they'd played slowly, they'd played deliberately. Why did you go after Collingwood the way that you did? Because it looked like you're actually playing into the hands of the way they wanted to play.
Yeah, when you scout Collingwood, it's really interesting when you're Hawthorn, because the way we would like to play is quick and affluent and play with some vibrancy and take a bit of risk. But when you play against Collingwood, that's exactly what sets their game up. And so in the planning, there was a bit of which way do we go? And probably the tipping point was the weather. We weren't sure about the weather. We thought it was likely to be wet. So if you wanted a ball control play and you wanted to take 120 marks against them, then that was going to probably be difficult. So we decided just don't talk too much about offense and just let the players play. And that's when we've coached our best and when our players have done the best job, is when they've been left alone as far as offense goes.
So on the weekend, we saw that really hard edge come into what you're doing. And I mean, we go back to the sides you played, and that's what Hawthorn were famous for. And so you can do all the celebrating you like, but you still got to win the footy when it's around your area, and that's what you're doing brilliantly across the ground.
Yeah, I mean, I think the focus from the public perspective is obviously the celebrations and what happens after the ball goes out of bounds and after the umpire has it back in his hands. But for us, very little of what we focus on is about that. You know, we're talking about minor details of the game. And very early in the game, there's a Mabior or Chol chase where he chases Noble. He doesn't quite get to him, but it's a terrifying, this big guy chasing you and just getting a finger on your right as you kick it, and the influence that when he puts that pressure on, he has. They're the things that we value, and so we don't talk too much about the celebrations. Adrian Hickmott does like to show the celebrations as the forwards coach, but the rest of us, we focus very much on the small things that we value within the game.
Mitch, I think about this year and how it's played out for the Hawks, the relationship that you have with Scrimshaw to have the conversation that you needed to have at the time, the Nick Watson goal kicking at the moment that we're here, that you're having the hands-on approach. So you're saying you have the hands-off, but I want to go back to 2022 and the treatment or the coaching that you put James Worpel under. He played 11 games in the AFL that year and spent a lot of time in the VFL. He has become an outstanding player for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, James Worpel is a bit of a coach's dream, and he's the guy that you want to have success because you want to be able to point at him and say, see, if you do the work, it might not all be easy, but it'll come good in the end. And I think when you look at James Worpel, he's the guy who's always in the gym, he's always first on the track, he's always working on his craft. And so when those guys start to flourish, it's really good for a coach because you can say to everyone else, see, if you keep working at it, this is what you'll get, even if there are bumps in the road. So, you know, he's best and fairest winner at a very young age, 20 years old, and then he's playing in the twos a couple of years later. It doesn't sound like a fairy tale story, but because of the work ethic that's behind it, you know that his trajectory is going to be strong, and he's been brilliant for us this year.
I'm talking about another star of your team, Jack Ginnivan. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that probably hate the way he plays, but when he's inside your four walls, have you seen more than what you expected from him?
I mean, I think obviously we saw him last year as an antagonist, and he did a lot of things in his first couple of years as a player. I think when I started to look at him as a potential option for us, after meeting him, I realised he was 20 years old. And you think about what he had done in his life and where he'd been and the amount of back pages he'd been on and some front pages, and you're saying, okay, this guy's 20 years old and he's already a premiership player. He's got huge football IQ, which was very, very quick to pick up. And what I'd learnt pretty quickly was that from a leadership perspective, I think he's got an enormous amount of upside. He's great at watching vision. He's great at helping other people with their patterns and explaining different aspects of the game. And so when you add those things together, the only thing left was, does he have the work ethic? And it didn't take us very long to realise that he did. So I'm not surprised by what he's done. It's probably happened as quickly as I would have hoped, or maybe a little bit quicker. But he's still scraping the edges, and I think there's more growth in Jack Innivan's game.
And Sam, you're always looking to improve your team, and Hawthorn have looked at players, restricted free agents, that type of player. Your club's name has been linked to Tom Barrass in recent times as well. You would know him, having spent time with him at the West Coast Eagles. Is he a player that you are interested in?
Yeah, I think every player at the moment that's up is a free agent. I think we've been linked to all of them at the moment. I think that market is something that's changed enormously since, certainly since I finished playing. And I think that it's not fair for coaches to talk about what players are doing in their positions that they're in. But I think every head coach, and I've said this before, every head coach would love to be able to improve their list for the next year. And whether that's through the draft, free agency or trades, they're all ways to do it. So any talented players we think will help us, we'll obviously be talking to.
You've gone after a couple of the key position players, defensive players as well. Is that still an area that you're trying to bolster as quickly as you possibly can?
Yeah, I mean, we've been a little bit unfortunate with, our injury list at the moment is quite strong, but the two big ones is, so we had James Blank go down with his knee in the pre-season, so he missed the whole season, and Mitch Lewis has now had his knee reconstruction as well. So sort of a centre-half forward and a full-back is the two positions that, from a list profile point of view, that we would like to look into. And obviously everyone would love some more explosive midfielders in their game. So there's three things that we'd look at. But anyone who's high talent, you're obviously looking if you can bring them into your organisation.
So a couple of the unheralded players, because we all look at Will Day and marvel, and the stars are the stars at all the clubs. But you brought in Massimo D'Ambrosio and Lloyd Meek, and they have both been unbelievably good. Are you amazed by that, or from what you see on the track, is that what you expected?
I think you have to figure out where your value is, and if you looked at Fremantle, they've got Sean Darcy, who is very, very young and very, very good. And Jackson was going there, and that was the rumours at the time. And so Lloyd Meek was someone who, I'd seen a little bit as a tall over there, and it was unlikely he was going to get too many looks. And so being able to lure him over has been great for us. And a bit like James Worpel, he does everything right. He spent most of last year in the VFL and started this year in the VFL. So it's not like he's a finished product yet either. He's only 25 years old, so expect a fair bit of growth in Lloyd. And Massimo, he was someone who I really liked in the under-18s, under-19s. And then when he went to Essendon in the mid-season, he was someone I'd kept an eye on because you sort of had watched him when he was a junior, and when the opportunity came up to get him, I suspected he was going to be a very good player. And, far from a finished product, Massimo, he does some great stuff. And he's just had his 21st birthday, and to play at the consistency that he does in a position on the wing, which I think is probably the most difficult position to be consistent in. I think that's what's been really good for him. James
Sicily's shoulder, how worried are you about that, if you are at all?
Well, I'm as worried as he is, and he's pretty courageous. He's playing and he does some unorthodox things. I think he called himself a dill. I don't think he's looked like a dill at any stage. I think he's looked enormously courageous, and he's got a couple of movements that he knows will put him at significant risk with his shoulder. He can still tackle, he can still get tackled, but he knows there's a couple of things that he should try to limit in his game. So he's doing that when it's the right time to do so, and I'm amazed at how mature he's been able to do that. In the right moment, he's been able to pull out of a contest. But when he has to go, he's done it every time. And full credit to him because it's pretty courageous what he's doing.
Who's the coach's pet, Mitch?
In the footy record every week, that's in the...
Yes.
And they fight over it and they get into whoever it is. It's been Dylan Moore, I think, the most.
Yep.
I think Josh Weddle's had a few. I think Jai Newcomb's had a couple. Will Day's had a couple. So they're all my favourites.
Can I just ask you one question about an issue that is obviously bubbling around in the game at the moment? I know Brad Scott said today that he'd like to abolish the sub rule and just have 5 on the interchange. Where do you sit on that?
No one likes the... As a coach, you never like the sub because you can say to somebody, you're the sub this week, and they're never particularly happy with that. And then the same conversation mid-game, you're being subbed out, never particularly happy with that conversation. So I think most coaches would like it abolished and would love to have the flexibility of 5. So I probably lean that way. There's a bit of the traditionalist in me that thinks it's a game where the toughest survive, and maybe it should only be 4. But I don't know if it's worth the amount of hassle it causes at the moment.
You must be so excited. Huge finish to this season. You've also got the Dingley precinct not far away, so the Hawthorn Footy Club is in a perfect launching pad.
Well, we hope so, but I would stress again, we're still 11th on the ladder, and it's not I saw your graphic come up before that since round 8 we're this year, but across the whole season we've still got plenty of work to do, and we know that every week is a mini-final for us to keep our season alive.
Well, allow us to get excited on your behalf.
Do that, you can do that.
Absolutely brilliant to watch. Well done, good luck for the rest of the year.
No worries, thanks guys.
Love chatting to Sam Mitchell. We're off to a break. Mitch Cleary when we come back.